morning. This is Professor Botanical, then Professor Cyril Sundara, and all other distinguished guests, and the organizers of the event, and my colleagues. Today, we are here to commemorate Alexander von Humboldt's Day, and he's a botanist and has contributed so much to the world of botany, and being the first botanical establishment in Sri Lanka, Royal Botanic Gardens Peradeniya, we are very happy to host this kind of event. Today I invite you all to enjoy the event and get inspired by the many achievements he has achieved during his lifetime.
Next, we will invite Dr. Cyril Sundara, who was the Director General of the Botanic Gardens previously, and now he is the research professor at the National Institute of Fundamental Science. So he will tell us more about the plant that we are sitting next to, or we are standing next to, all about it. That is Humboldtia laurifolia, endemic plant to Sri Lanka. And this had been, he will tell the history of this plant and more about its ecology.
Okay, thank you, Professor Tilaka. So it's a pleasure to be here in this place at Royal Botanic Gardens Peradeniya, the oldest botanic garden in Sri Lanka, established in 1821. In fact, this was a garden even during the time of Sri Lankan kings, coming from 1370s, that's in the 14th century. King Vikrambahu the 13th had a King Vikrambahu III had a garden here, and also a small cottage. And when the British started to develop this place back in the 1820s, in fact, we are celebrating the bicentennial bicentenary next year, the year after next rather. And when this was developed, the botanical gardens, Alexander Moon was the first superintendent. Then came a very interesting botanist who started his career in Brazil and came here, George Gardner. And during his time, this part of the garden was developed. That was in 1840s, and the garden is given separate different sections are devoted to different plants. On the left hand side we have palms, and during Gardner's time he set aside this area for legumes, leguminous plants. But now we have a separate section for legumes. It's bigger than this area, but this is a small area. And one of the most interesting legume planted during that time was the plant in focus today, Humboldtia laurifolia, named after Alexander von Humboldt by Wall in 1794. It's a very important endemic plant to Sri Lanka. I'm sure you'll be learning a lot about the biology, ecology, and historical importance of the plant during the course of this ceremony later in the day. It's a beautiful plant. You can see it's a medium-sized plant, tree with a lot of biological features, which I'm not going to talk to. There are very interesting relationships with some animals and various other factors. There are medicinal values, ornamental values, and more than that, it was named after the great botanist Alexander von Humboldt. And Peradeniya Gardens is the Peradeniya Garden, and also the botanical gardens we established in the west zone in Avisavella are trying to propagate this and conserve it in situ, ex situ, outside its native habitats, and there are also measures to conserve it in situ in protected areas in different parts of the wet zone. So it has a very interesting biogeographical distribution, and I'm sure we'll learn more about it during the course of the day. as you can see, it's a very old plant, more than 100 years old, although the size is small. This was planted in the early 19th century as the garden. This part of the garden was developed by George Gardner. Uh, the bark and the wood is very old, but it's still in good shape.
Before we talk about the biology of this tree, first we look at the history of this individual plant in the Royal Botanic Gardens at Peradeniya. As you can see, it's very much, the basal part of the tree is very much decomposed and the central part is almost gone, and it's surviving mainly because of these peripheral parts, and a new branch has come up, and that is what is now appearing as the main tree. So this plant is at least 150 years old according to the records. Now this work by Carl Combine, Beth Norden, Melinda Rickson and Fredrickson together, they provided a detailed account of Humboldtia laurifolia in Sri Lanka in this publication, which is the Smithsonian Contributions to Zoology in 1999. Now in that, they mention about this tree in the gardens, where they say that, I quote, in addition to the field locations, there are two very old trees in the Peradeniya Botanic Gardens, Peradeniya, which presumably were those studied by F.O. Bauer in 1887. The ant collections are still healthy. So this plant had been originally studied by F.O. Bauer in 1887, and he had studied the biology of Humboldtia laurifolia using two plants in the gardens. The other plant is no more, but this is the only surviving oldest plant. There are few new ones planted recently, but this has a historical value in the gardens. Humboldtia laurifolia is a legume, and as such it has pinnately compound leaves like this, pinnately compound leaves, and the branches are sort of flowing down like this, and the inflorescences are coming up. This is the month of September, and usually September to November the flowers are coming up in this species. So they are beautiful flowers. Inflorescences are very pretty, and if you get too close to it, you can see that the branching pattern is a zigzag pattern, as you can see here. It has a zigzag pattern which is very characteristic of this. That is because the younger parts, actually, now when a apical bud comes, the leaf goes in that direction, and the next one goes about 90 degrees in opposite direction. So there is a zigzag arrangement always present. So that's one of the characteristic features of this. In addition, of course, each time when a young flush comes, there are about 4 to 6 internodes are included in that flush. As you can see. So this is a new flush that is coming up. Then when the old ones are mature and green, the new flush comes out, and it brings about 4 to 6 internodes and nodes together with that. That is another feature that is of importance. Next we will move to a place where there is a young flush, and then look at in more detail the features of this myrmecophytic species, Humboldtia laurifolia. So this is the new flush. 1, 2, 3, 4, like 4 new internodes are there now. So this particular one, if we take, the most characteristic feature is its swollen internode, which you can see here. Swollen internode. The swollen internode. And its base is thin and narrow, and it's solid. If you cut open, it is solid. But when it moves, when the internode is the upper region of the internode is swollen and it's hollow inside. We will see it in a moment. And at the base, there are two-part stipule. One is kidney-shaped or reniform part here, and the other one is triangular and facing upwards. So that's at the base of each internode. And between those two, if you can see this aperture, and that is the region, or that is the area through which these mutualistic insects or invertebrates in general, they enter the hollow internode. So that is naturally formed. It is not formed by any insect, but it's naturally formed, and around it, it is usually you get the callus formation, and it is like that. So at each, between these stipules, at each internode, you find that one, this aperture. This also should have one. All these ones. Yes. Now that is closing up because it's mature now. As you can see, it's closing up. And these internodes, as they mature, they become solid, and eventually they are solid, they become solid as it goes on. So the younger parts with hollow internodes move towards the edge of the tree, as you can see. And if we take one single leaf, that is a pinnately compound leaf, you can see these features. The internode region from which the leaf rises, it has these starting here, this is a beautiful one which with aperture, the opening to this one. So this is the opening to the one below that, and opening of this one is here, and it has two part stipules, reniform part at the base and triangular part on top. Then the most interesting feature of this is that the hollow internode, in which nearly 14 different insect species have been identified by Cromba and others, and they feed on these nectar which is found on these glands on the open on the abaxial surface. These are the glands, these red dots that you can see, these ones. And there are usually 3 or 4, there's one here, 3 or 4 per each leaflet. And you can see them, 1, 2, 3 here, and in some you find 4. Now in this one there are 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, like that. So numbers vary from 2 to 4. So they have nectar, and they provide these sugary secretions to the insects that are inhabiting these internodes. So in return, those inhabiting insects they provide protection from herbivory to these younger parts of the plant. So young leaves are protected, and inflorescence, they are all protected by these insects. And among the insects, Technomyrmex albipes, that is one of the most dominant insect species. Technomyrmex albipes is the species that had been identified in Sri Lanka. This one. Then even these stipules also carry these glands. So these glands are present. So these are extrafloral glands found during most of the time on the plant. Therefore, the inhabiting insects which are providing protective function, they have food throughout the year like. So therefore, it's a very good example of a mutualistic association. Next, if I may open one of these internodes. Saw an ant moving in that direction. Yes, you can see the pith inside. Pith, the yellow small sort of masses that you find, those are the pith region being degraded and eaten by the insects that occupy this. But at this moment you cannot see any insects here, but they may have moved out, or they may not have inhabited this region as yet. So that's one of the reasons. But I saw one moving in that direction when I started handling this internode. So that's the part, and this is where it forms a hollow chamber, and these are also called domatia, and they provide protection to these ants. So in addition to the ants, there are wasps and bees. They are not occupying the same, only the ants occupy them, and the other ones, they have a kind of a separation of species are found in different internodes. Those which are occupied by ants are not occupied by any other insects. So the wasps and others are found in other separate internodes. So that's another feature that is of importance. So that's about the myrmecophily of this plant. So they are, and it's an ornamental plant, and once these young inflorescences come in bloom, they of course provide a pretty, and the tree itself is a very ornamental tree, and it can be grown in a kind of a moist forest, a tropical region, and it has been cultivated in other countries like Indonesia as well. So it's a beautiful plant to be cultivated. And being a legume, it has root nodules which are functional. Root nodules are found, it has been found out, and its seed germination has its own interesting methods. We will walk along the garden, and we have again the garden staff here, and they will tell us about the plants and the animals as we go along. And also we have two eminent zoologists, Dr. Sampath Seneviratne and Dr. Sandun Pereira. They will tell us about the animals and the birds, especially as we come to know them, or come to see them, and to get to know them from them. Yes. So we start walking along this beautiful garden, and on a beautiful day, I'm sure you will enjoy the walk, virtual walk with us. Yes.
Yeah, we are at the, this is the mid-elevation wet zone of tropical Sri Lanka, which is about 7 degrees north of the equator. So it's very, very high in endemicity. Diversity is very high for certain taxa. Diversity is not so high in certain taxa like birds. Only about 5% of the global diversity is here. But the characteristic feature is the very high endemicity and the relic species, where we have small pillars in the phylogeny, where the reminiscent lineages are still there in the island. This is a very old landmass, a Gondwanan landmass, where both the Laurentian and Gondwanan lineages accumulate, and through extinction, pillars, isolated pillars, we call relics, are there. So we might see a few today.
Yeah, it's a beautiful day today. I hope we will see a lot of birds, and if the sun comes out, we can see some butterflies as well. So let's please join us with the virtual tour in the Royal Botanic Gardens.
I wonder whether you can hear like this the squirrels, palm squirrel. It's a very common mammal squirrel here. It's not endemic to Sri Lanka, but it has a the subspecies has a very different vocalization. This particular call that I don't know whether the mic can pick. Okay, please. That's the hill miners are calling. In the sort of taller forests or arborea, you hear more than you see. That's common miner. The shape of the garden is almost like a horseshoe. From 3 sides, you can see the river Mahavali bordering, and the other boundary is the Kandy Kalambu Plateau. Almost like a small island.
Yeah, the hill miner was the call comes from the hill miner.
There's 2 species. One, this is the widespread South Asian species called Indian hill miner or lesser hill miner. But here you can see in hills the endemic Ceylon hill miner or the Sri Lanka hill miner. And there was a spotted dove also there. Again, it's a widespread species, but the color patterns and vocalization is different in Sri Lanka. So, of the about 1/3 of breeding residents, even in birds, has a endemic subspecies of some form.
You can go to the board also, and he will explain about the arrangement of different sections in the Botanic Gardens. Dr. Cyril will explain that.
Okay. So actually we are here. The river Mahavali goes right around the gardens, and the southern boundary is the Kandy Kalambu is from this side. Kandy, and that's the southern boundary. From the west and north and east is covered by the river Mahali. We are here. This part of the garden is called South Garden because it's the southernmost part of the garden, and actually it's also called New Garden. Sinhala is Salutwatta New Garden because that was developed in the 1840s, but still it's New Garden for us. So you can see how old is the garden. It's about 200 years old. And we have a pond there, we can see it on our way back, in the shape of Sri Lanka. And these thematic planting you get here. On the other side we have old palms and then bamboos here, pandans, the banana family, and agaves here. And up here you have plants belonging to the family Ebenaceae. So legumes are actually here, but we saw very special group of legumes planted during the time of Gardner. When this part was not developed at that time actually. So the thematic planting was done later. So legumes are all shifted to this area, section B. But we have the old legumes like Mimophandra mora and Humboldtia and other things we saw in that old section.
I think we can talk a little about the Mahaweli River here as well, sir.
Yeah.
Yeah, so as Prof was explaining, the Mahaweli River takes a very interesting turn here. This is the longest river in Sri Lanka, and this is more or less the northern edge of the Central Highlands. And the river takes a turn here and goes along this side. That actually carves a new valley separating the Central Highlands from the Knuckles Mountains. That is biogeographically very important for the country, where there have been a lot of in situ speciations that are happening for sister species in the Central Highlands and in Knuckles Mountain Massif. And this is the way towards carving the Vicarian's barrier between the Central Highlands and the Knuckles. Yeah.
And I thought to mention something else as well. So with this, with its own water that accumulates in the wet southwestern slope get channeled into the dry zone, carving a really interesting stretch of riverine forest all the way to Trincomalee, and yes, its own plants and animal lineages have been moved with the wet forest along deep into the dry zone, because the Mahaweli River is the largest river and also it has water throughout the year, so it creates this interesting wet corridor through the dry plains. One of the richest, most biodiverse areas like Knuckles and in the Waskamua basin is actually get the water and the wetness through this
Turn, yeah.
turn. Yeah. So this is an interesting biogeographic kind of point in Sri Lankan geology and geography, because of this turn that this large river takes, it gets direct water to the wet zone.
And over the years, the course of the river has changed. This part now, originally it was going that way, and about 1 acre of the garden has got washed away. And in fact, the road is now, if you look at the plants, the list of plants, the map of plants, you can see the road here, and the plants that were found on this side of the road are now on the other side, because that was due to the washing away of 1 acre when the river, or the course of the river changed. And the other important feature here is that the total area of the garden is about 147 acres, and it's more or less flat. In Kandy, to get a contiguous area of this size is very rare. So this is one of the features why, I mean, when they selected the land back in the 1820s, Alexander Moon used that also as a feature, and also this river bordering that has helped to select the land. We also, now actually one of the reasons why botanic gardens were established in Sri Lanka was to introduce economically important plants into the country. Peradeniya was the hub. We were communicating with the new gardens, and one of the most important economic plants introduced into Asia through Kew Gardens was rubber. Rubber was introduced in 1876. Rubber came from Amazon to Kew and from Kew to here, and a satellite garden was established in 1876 to plant rubber trees. And those rubber plants came in a Wardian case, about some 1,000 or saplings, seedlings of rubber, and some of the plants were actually planted here. You can see some of the old plants coming from the original lot. The bulk went to Gampa Gardens, and some of the original rubber trees are here. These dates back to 1870s. Actually, from here only the rubber seeds went to Singapore Botanical Gardens, and from there to Malaysia. And the cradle of rubber industry is in Sri Lanka. Actually. You can see the river. Actually, we can move into the rest of the south garden also.
You can see rosemary parakeets.
As for Dr. Sandul Perra and Dr. Sampath Silvat mentioned, we have a very rich bird life here because it's an assortment of different food plants. I don't think nowhere in this country you get this kind of assortment of trees from Brazil, trees from New World or South Old World, and all sorts of plants, subtropical trees even. So it's an assortment of food plants. So for birds, this is actually tree.
And butterflies.
Butterflies. It's like being in New York. I mean, all sorts of different restaurants.
And to add that, we are entering into the migratory season. We get, especially the birds that come to this sort of woodlands, inland woodlands, are mostly coming from the foothills of Himalayas. So the Himalaya is another very important biogeographic zone in our region, but it's a much younger area. Like this earth is much older than where the Himalaya is, because Himalaya is formed about 40 million years ago. These are over 100 million year old formations, especially if you move into a little bit east from here, the central massif, the central highlands, the portion of central highlands will start, and that central highlands is much older than the Himalayas. So the birds that found in the foothills of Himalayas now started to migrate for its winter months to spend in the lush green wet tropical forest of southwestern Ghats and Sri Lankan southwest. So for them also this is a really interesting place because this is still very green, tall, highly productive, and relatively less disturbed.
There's a white-bellied drongo here, and during this time of the day and forests of this sort, usually we can get mixed species flocks moving, and this is the riverine forest. So we are not lucky enough, but we can see the white-vented drongo and red-vented bulbul, and there are a few sunbirds around there.
And you can hear the spotted dove. And yellow-billed babblers. The yellow-billed babbler, again another species which is not endemic, but those are near endemics where they have a different vocalization and different plumage patterns. As I mentioned, even like the animals that can cross the sea strait, a short, narrow strait between India and Sri Lanka, like birds and bats, especially birds, 1/3 of our resident forms, subspecies or species, are unique to the country. It is very high endemicity. So when it comes to less mobile ones and the ones that are cannot tolerate salt water, like freshwater crabs, amphibians, freshwater fish, has a much higher endemicity in Sri Lanka, like any other island of this nature. Sri Lanka is a continental island, not an oceanic island, but still very high unique endemism and diversity within the islands formed over the years.
There's a farm squirrel on that rock, climbing up.
I wonder whether you can move up. There's a nest of Sri Lanka barbet or the crimson fronted barbet. They are up in the tree. That is an endemic species. Most of these, this is like close relatives of these endemics are found in the Western Ghats, the Nilgiris and Ootis, and then the Western Ghats of India, which is expected because that's where the nearest wet zone in the mainland to be found. But Indian wet zone, being Sri Lankan wet zone, is isolated by Sri Lankan dry and Indian dry zone, as well as the strait of the Pork Strait, a narrow strait, sea strait. So because of that, it like amplifies the forces of isolation. So these are examples of such isolation.
I don't know whether you can hear, we can hear the black-headed oriole and iora. Oriole is actually here on this tree. I think you saw the yellow slide through the canopy. So these are common birds in the area.
You can hear the
So further on we can see the cycads collection, the bamboo collection and agave collection. And this side is the medicinal plant garden. We have about 200 different species of medicinal plants used in indigenous medicine in Sri Lanka. Very quickly we can go and cycads in the garden. And then we can Here we have a collection of cycads, the family Cycadaceae, gymnosperms. We have at least 2 gymnosperms in this country native to Sri Lanka. Cycas nathosti and Cycas ilanica. Ilanica is ilanica, which is actually a critically endangered plant. And the big ones are actually Encephalatus from Africa. They are actually the dominant trees during the time of dinosaurs in the Jurassic period. Very beautiful plant, very slow growing plant from Africa. Encephalatus hildebrandi. these two native species of madu, Cichus natostia and Cichus silenica, they are actually indigenous Sri Lanka. Natos is typically and whatever we had, whatever left was destroyed due to tsunami.
It's a coastal.
Yeah, that's the last time. Actually, the butterflies need sunlight to bask and fly. So in the early morning, there are very few butterflies. You can see a glass kite here because this actually is a Lamiaceae plant. So it is quite odoriferous. So the you can see even there are no any flowers. The butterfly can suck the leaf juice. So from that one. This is a very good plant for the Ganoid butterflies, Heliotropium indicum. This provides some pheromone to produce male butterflies to attract females. That's why they are coming to these flowers, especially for the leaves. You can see when the plant is dying, butterflies attract. So many butterflies are attracted to these plants, especially in the dry zone riverbeds and tank beds.
We use the bamboo collection, different types of bamboo.
There's a yeah.
You might not able to see that there's an endemic woodpecker, the Dinopium serodus, red-back flakeback. It's there. It's a relatively common bird in this kind of habitat, but it's endemic, only found in Sri Lanka. Its close relatives are also found in the dry slopes in plains in the northern Sri Lanka. But this one is endemic to the wet zone and to Sri Lanka.
Yeah, let's make a move.
Here we have a very special species in an avenue, double coconut, Lodoicea maldivica. It's actually native to Seychelles Island, but originally it was thought that originally this was found first as a floating nut, and the botanists who discovered it thought that the nut came from Maldives, but actually it's from Seychelles. Lodoicea maldivica, only found in Seychelles Islands, even within Seychelles Islands in a very small place, limited distribution it has in 2 small islands. We have male and female trees separately. The one with the fruits or nuts is the female tree, and the one there and here are all male trees. And after fertilization, the fruit stays on the tree 7 years, and it also takes about 2 years for germination. And outside Seychelles, Peradeniya Botanic Gardens has the largest collection of double coconut.
You can see behind the farm, you can see a large eagle. That is a white-bellied sea eagle. I don't know whether you can see, it's the second largest eagle in Sri Lanka. It is lush green forest and plenty of habitat for it to breed. And the Mahaveli River gives it large fish that it needs, prey fish. So large eagles. It's a close relative of gold eagle. About the size is smaller than a bald eagle, the same colorations except it's much rare, can be found here.
Okay, I think we have to wrap up the morning
There's
garden
one
walk.
more bird to show. On this double coconut, there is the most common kingfisher that you can find in Sri Lanka, the white-throated kingfisher. We can see the back of the bird.
Back of the on top of that front. Right now, with this, we are going to wrap up the garden walk.
The diversity is so high, I will stop you again.
Yeah.
If you can hear, this giant flying fox, Pteropus giganteus, the largest of the bats in this part of the world, and also one of the largest bats in the world, is calling. Those trees are full of the day camp of giant flying fox. One of the interesting things about the Peradeniya Gardens is that like if you come here, you can see lots of birds and fair bit of mammals, even though it's in the middle of a fairly populated area. And the giant flying fox is a very interesting species because it helps dispersing large seeds, and it's a crop pest now because their population is growing.
Fruit bats, right?
Fruit bats.
So these fruit bats actually, if you come during say around 5 o'clock in the afternoon, you see one group goes towards Gampala and the other group goes towards Matarita. So they are actually pollinating the various,
Groups in large numbers.
very large numbers.
Long
It's a sea of fruit bats. And also speaking of these flying mammals, we also have flying squirrels. Very rare giant flying squirrels, and the animal life, the fauna is very rich here. And once again, we are going to wrap it up, and we are going to meet around 9 o'clock at the National Herbarium for the webinar organized to commemorate the birthday of Alexander von Humboldt.